Welcome Wargamers, Doug here from 2 Plus Tough, and today we are going to be doing a review of the Maggotkin of Nurgle Vanguard box. Now, you may have seen that I did a review of their Start Collecting box before, but it looks like Games Workshop is moving towards getting rid of those in favor of the Vanguard sets. Essentially a 1,000 point army in a box, and so its contents are a little bit different. Now, the real reason I wanted to do this is not just because the starting point is very different, but also they've had a new battle tome come out along with it. And so what I'm going to do in this video is talk about what comes in the box, like the actual models themselves. We're going to review the war scrolls that are on each of them. Just so you know ahead of time, they're not online, they're not digital yet. And so I'm just going to do a shot with the downward cam on here and walk you through the actual stats of the units, and then I'll overlay some, some B-roll, some art, and that kind of stuff just to make it a little more visually interesting. But we're going to review each of these units and kind of have a discussion about the overall value of this box given its price point now that we know it, and talk about great ways to start a new Maggotkin of Nurgle army. So without further ado, let's jump into the contents of the Maggotkin of Nurgle Vanguard set. You receive 1 Spoilepox Scrivener, 10 Plague Bearers of Nurgle, 5 Putrid blightkings, and 2 Pusgoyle blightlords, but there's an optional build where you build one of them as a Lord of Afflictions, he's a hero character, and then the other Pusgoyle blightlord can come with him. Now, at a top level view of this box, I have to say, it seems like a pretty good start. I mean, the new Maggotkin of Nurgle book, I'll be perfectly upfront and honest, they sent me an advanced copy and it got delayed a couple of weeks, so I actually haven't had a chance to be able to play it simply because my NDA wasn't up yet in the time that I was hoping it to be done by. But what I can tell you from looking at the contents of this box, you get a great smattering and a sense of what the demon side of Nurgle looks like as well as the mortal side. And when you're talking about an intro product, right? Someone walks into a Games Workshop store, they see that thing on the shelf and they go, that looks cool, I want to try that. Getting them exposure to as many parts of a faction, because there are generally multiple aesthetics within each army in Games Workshop, I think is ultimately a win. The fact that you get a good mix of, troop sizes, meaning the 10-man Plague Bearer squad, the 5-man blightkings, and the 2-man Pusgoyle blightlords, I think is really cool. The only thing it really seems to be missing is a mortal hero, and if you really wanted one, you could just turn the Lord of Afflictions into one, and boom, there you go. It also does my favorite thing, which is it gives you plenty of battle line choices. That's always a big deal when it comes to the Start Collecting boxes that they used to do, and they still do for other factions, where I like when they set you up for success when it comes to actually having a playable army, so actually having battle line and hero options and that kind of stuff. What you're going to see with this box is you have plenty of battle line choices. You just need a minimum of 2. You could have up to, there's 2, and then you can have the Lord of Afflictions, which would ultimately make Pusgoyle blightlords battle line, but not if it's just the one guy. It's kind of a weird situation with just the single troops, but it is what it is. But yeah, having, at least 2 battle line options, a 3rd heavy hitter unit in the Pusgoyle blightlords, as well as a hero that just kind of introduces ideas of synergy to the new player, I think is a really good win. If I had one critique about it, it's that there's no characters in this set that use magic. And the only reason that's a critique is because, to me, the point of a starter product is to introduce and expose new players to as many aspects of the game as possible. But, just with the set that is here, you get access to just about everything. There's not really any shooting, aside from, I think the Pusgoyle blightlords can throw a head or something like that. I mean, I know the Lord of Afflictions can. So there's not a whole lot there, and then, you're not being introduced to how magic works or even unbinding. So that's kind of a thing to keep in mind. But ultimately, Nurgle has plenty of those things. You can just kind of expand into them later on. So without further ado, what we're going to do is go unit by unit, breaking down what they do. And like I said, because I just have the downward cam and the resolution's not terribly great on it, I'm going to overlay some artwork just for each unit and just kind of get you a sense of what it is. So listen closely as you're painting, and we'll talk about the Maggotkin of Nurgle. And here we are at the downward cam. For me personally, I always like to start with the basic infantry and then move to talking about heroes, because once you have a baseline, and then you can understand how they are being buffed or debuffed or that kind of stuff, it paints a little bit more of a context picture for us. So let's talk about Plague Bearers. Okay, they're the most numerous unit you get in the box. You get 10 of them. They have a movement of 4, painfully slow, 2 wounds, which is wonderful. They used to be 1 wound models. bravery of 10 because they're demons, and a 6-up save. Now, things that are important regarding this unit, they are Maggotkin of Nurgle, which according to their faction rules, let's see, let's go back here, back. They are going to be giving enemies diseases, which means anytime somebody is within 3 inches of them at the, the battle movement phase and combat phase, they'll accrue disease points, and then in the battle shock phase, they will take damage possibly based on how much disease they have on them. In addition to that, they are all disgustingly resilient. They all have a 5-up ward save, so they are just shrugging off 1/3 of the wounds that come at them pretty much all of the time. Beyond that, there's not really a whole lot of these rules that pertain to the demon side of things. So for Plague Bearers, the 5-up ward save is a huge deal, especially with 2 wounds, and they're giving out diseases just by being near people. Now, on top of that, they have a Plague Sword, just a 1-inch range, 1 attack each, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. That is a definition of a sad panda profile. Not doing a whole lot with that. One model in the unit can be the Plague Ridden, meaning the champion, and he just gets an extra attack. So even if you get them all in, you're still only looking at 11 attacks from this entire unit. 1 in every 10 models from this unit can be an Icon Bearer. If the unmodified battle shock roll for a unit that includes any Icon Bearers is 1, you can return 1 slain model to that unit, and no models in that unit flee from the battle shock phase. Now, this is really important. With a bravery of 10, they're not going to be running away a lot. And I always tell this to newer players that are playing any of these demon, or chaos armies that have demons in them. Always roll for battle shock, even if you cannot fail, because there's a 14% chance, rolling 1 on a die, you get a guy back just for free. So that's a huge deal. It's easy to be like, oh, even if I rolled a 6 or whatever, I can't run away. Who cares? And you don't roll it. No, always roll it for demons, because getting models back is awesome. Then we have the Musician. 1 in every 10 models in this unit can be a Piper. Reroll battle shock rolls of 1 for enemy units that are within 6 inches of friendly Piper. So not only are you really excited to roll your battle shock phase because you might get somebody back, but also you're excited for your opponents to do it because you can attempt to make them fail. And so I think battle shock has definitely taken on a new level of significance in the current edition. The 3rd edition just dropped, and being only to do Inspiring Presence once is a huge deal. Next up, we have the Cloud of Flies. Subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target this unit while it has 5 or more models. So, they're not the killiest things. They can get stuck into combat, and they can shrug off, quite a few wounds. Between 2 wounds each, there's 10 dudes in the unit. You got a 5-up ward save. That's not bad. Like, they're gonna get stuck in. It will take more work to remove them than points it took for you to bring them. That's kind of the idea. And so being not immune, but resistant to being shot as they approach is a huge buff. But now I want to jump into the Spoilepox Scrivener. He is the hero unit that you get in the box. He is specifically for demons. I thought it made more sense to jump to him next, since his synergies directly relate to the Plague Bearers and not really much else when it comes to the mortal side of the entire box. So, Spoilepox Scrivener, movement value of 4. He's got 5 wounds on him, so he's not the tankiest. 10 bravery, 5-up save, and of course he would also have that ward save as well. For missile weapons, he actually has one. It's called the Disgusting Sneezes. It has a 7-inch range, does D6 attacks, 2s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, and 1 damage. It's there. You don't really want this guy in combat. He's not super killy. As for melee weapons, he has a range 2 weapon, which is awesome, the Distended Maw. Has 2 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, rend 2, and 2 damage, so I might stand corrected. He can lay a punch, it's just not a lot of attacks. Now, where he really shines is how he buffs the unit of Plague Bearers that you get. His ability is Keep Counting, I'm Watching You. If you don't know, lore-wise, this guy is basically keeping a tally of all the diseases that the Plague Bearers find or create or, evolve into. And so he's constantly having them count plagues, Pusgoyles, all these kinds of things that he finds in the realms. So the way this reads is, at the start of the combat phase, you can say that this unit will call for a count. If you do so, pick one friendly Plague Bearer host, which is just Plague Bearers, wholly within 14 inches of this unit, and pick one of the following counts for that unit to carry out. The effect of that count lasts until the end of that phase. So start of the combat phase, pick a Plague Bearer unit within 14, wholly within 14, and they get one of these things, okay? That's basically all it is, and it only lasts to the end of the phase. There's Tally of Blows. Add 1 to the attacks characteristic of melee weapons used by the unit carrying out this count. So all of a sudden our Plague Bearers go from 11 attacks for all 10 of them to 21 attacks. That's not bad at all. Studied Lacerations. Improve the rend characteristic by that unit by 1. Okay, still 11 attacks, but now we got rend. Now we're cooking. Recorded Stamina. Add 1 to the save rolls for attacks that target the unit carrying out this count. So save rolls are interesting. If you looked at the Plague Bearers, they've only got, a 6-up save, and then they have a 5-up ward. Going to a 5-up, 5-up is not, to me, spectacular. It has uses, certainly, especially with a big blob of these guys. But on the whole, I would much rather focus on more attacks and or, rend and that kind of stuff. Now, one thing I want to throw up here, I'm not going to go into it because it's not in this box. However, the Sloppity Bile Piper and the Poxbringer, all 3 of these units, including the Spoilepox Scrivener that you get, are like Heralds of Nurgle. Each of them buffs Plague Bearers in their own unique way. If you have multiple Spoilepox Scriveners, you cannot give them multiple counts. You can only basically, Spoilepox Scrivener can pick one unit and buff him. But that same unit can receive buffs from the Poxbringer and the Sloppity Bile Piper. So if you have this trifecta, you can supercharge a unit, or of course spread those buffs all around. So I'll leave that for you with your battle tome when you get it to figure out. But I just wanted to say, this is just one piece of the puzzle that makes Plague Bearers really cool. So we'll do that. And we're going to move on to the mortal side of things. The Putrid blightkings have changed quite a bit. Again, you get 5 of them in the set, and they are the battle line mortal aspect of this army. Basically, they have a 4-inch move. Again, very slow, but 4 wounds with a 4-up save and 8 bravery. Now keep in mind, with the new battle tome, it used to be that they did not have disgustingly resilient because they weren't demons, but that has changed because they are Maggotkin of Nurgle, and that is what the 5-up ward save is tied to now. So doesn't matter, demon, if it's in this book, it's pretty much got that rule, with the exception of the terrain. So 4-up save and a 5-up ward save is tanky, especially with 4 wounds each. They're going to need it because they're going to get shot to all get out on their way up because they move 4 inches, but by golly, when they get there, they don't really move a whole lot. For their attacks, they have the Blighted Weapons, and this changed immensely from their previous iteration. It has a range of 1, which, given their big bases, you're going to struggle to get all of them into combat sometimes, depending on what you're fighting against. Like a big old blob of clan rats, yeah, they can all get in, but if it's like Stormcast, there might be 1 or 2 guys out. Attacks, 5 attacks each, which is great. 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and 1 damage. So that's not a bad profile, especially comparing it to Vindictors or Liberators. But keep in mind, the more that they are in combat with someone, with that great save, with that great health pool, the longer they are giving disease points to their enemy. So that's a huge deal to factor into their damage output. Now we're going to look here for the champion. They have a blightlord. The model has a wounds characteristic of 5, so instead of getting a buff to their attacks like everybody else, it's just whoever is in charge of the warband is just a little bit thicker of a boy. 2 C's on that thickness. Standard bearer, 1 in every 5 models can be a standard bearer, icon bearer. Add 1 to the bravery characteristic. Okay, it's pretty simple. And then the musician, they have that big bell that goes around their back. Reroll battle shock rolls of 1. It functions the exact same as the demon aspect of things. So you get a buff to your bravery here. You don't get the ability to return models because they're not demons, but you still get to force your opponent to reroll 1s, which is the most successful roll that they can make, which is great. And then they also, for the special rules, they have Relentless Attackers. At the end of the combat phase, pick one enemy unit with a wounds characteristic of 3 or less, that's within 3 inches of this unit. Roll 1 dice for each model in that unit that's within 3 inches of that enemy model. For each roll that exceeds the enemy's wounds characteristic, it takes a mortal wound, and that's on top of the disease points and stuff. So the more guys you have into the thick of combat, like actually they're physically present in combat, the more of these rolls you're going to make. They used to have this ability where 6s would explode, right? If you rolled a 6, it turns into D6 hits. And so they could be very swingy. You would either do a bucket, KFC bucket of attacks, or not much at all. And I feel like they've really tamed that in. They gave them 5 attacks each, which is wonderful. That's what my decimators have. It's beautiful. And then other ways to give them mortal wound output, which again stacks with all Maggotkin stuff. So they're one that on paper, it looks like all they did was lose options, but I do believe in practice they're going to, it's not going to be as drastic. It's in terms of literal output, I think it's going to be pretty comparable. Now next up are the Pusgoyle blightlords, and this is a unit that I deeply loved in the last edition because I could get them to go super speed and turn 1 charge like a madman. But here we have 8-inch move, which is speedy in this army. We have 8 wounds each, 8 bravery, and a 4-up save. Again, on top of disgustingly resilient, a 4-up save is terrific. Huge wound pool. There's only 2 guys. I love them. For their weapons, only melee weapons. They have the blighted weapons, which is the same profile as the Blight King. 5 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. But then they also gain the mount that they're on. The fly that they're riding has like these mouth parts and stinger. Now, they used to be all different profiles and it was madness. They've really condensed it into a single profile for attacks. 6 attacks, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It's just a lot of attacks. Keep in mind, with the way that disease works in Nurgle, if you get a hit roll of 6, they get diseased. If I'm not mistaken, it might be wound roll. Let me triple check before I'm too wrong. Yep. Unmodified hit roll for an attack made with a missile weapon or melee weapon is 6. You get an additional disease point. So basically what I'm saying is by the sheer amount of dice that these guys are going to be throwing out, you're not only doing fairly good attacks, 3-up is a good profile, but you're also throwing disease points out there. So let's go through here. We have elite models in this unit can issue commands to their own unit, so you don't have to worry about a champion. There isn't one, but they can just do that naturally. The mount, meaning it's just telling you which profile is for the mount itself. It can fly, which is wonderful in this army because you do move so slow. Having things that can go over terrain is terrific. And we'll go into their actual rules. Rack and Ruin. After a model in this unit finishes a charge move, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 1 inch of that model. Add 2 to the roll if the model is armed with a Dolorous Toxin. So that's one of the weapon options you can give these guys. On a 4-up, that enemy suffers D3 mortal wounds. So it's just about charging, okay? If this unit has more than 1 model, roll to determine if the mortal wounds are inflicted. Okay, basically you count up how many mortal wounds are delivered and then your opponent removes models. This little bottom thing here is only so that your opponent doesn't pull stuff away and all of a sudden the second guy who charged as part of the same unit doesn't have anyone around him. Like, they both made the charge, they both get to apply damage, and then your opponent removes casualties. For Relentless Attacker, we have at the end of the combat phase, pick 1 enemy unit with a wounds characteristic of 3 or less. And that's basically the same thing as here. You pick someone with a easier wound characteristic, however many guys you have near here, roll a die, and they might suffer mortal wounds based on that. So, yeah, these guys are pretty simple, pretty straightforward profiles. I like how they kept them pretty comparable to one another in terms of, 5 guys. We have 2 here, minimum. One thing that they didn't give them, however, is like for a lot of these really, really large flying units, they have rules where they can kind of be a little bit further apart, like 3-inch coherency rather than like right up on each other. They opted not to do that for this. I don't really get why, but I don't know. These guys were always a problem when it came to transporting because the wings are so wide. So I'm a little curious as to why they didn't get that. But then we're going to move on to the Lord of Afflictions, which he should be around here somewhere. Here we go. So when you get this box, an option that you have is you could build 2 Pusgoyle blightlords. I would suggest giving one of them the Dolorous Toxin, which is like the bell base that's dragging. 1 in every 2 will always have that. You can either go 2 Pusgoyle blightlords, which is a solid unit. It counts as battle line if you have a Lord of Afflictions general, or you can do one of these guys that never counts as battle line and a Lord of Afflictions. Okay, and so let's talk about this hero option really briefly. Lord of Afflictions has a movement of 8 wounds as well, which is weird. Normally not named characters, but characters, heroes get at least 1 more wound. He has a 3-up save, again, and a 5-up ward save. I love it. And a bravery characteristic of 9. He can fly. I'm not going to go over the claws and mouth parts. It's the exact same. But his weapon is the Fester Spike. 1 inch range, 4 attacks, 3s and 3s, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, -1 rend, and D3 damage. So it's not wildly different, but the damage output could be a bit higher. Now, as for his special rules, we got a few things going on here. There's the Incubatch. If this unit has an Incubatch, which is just a thing he's holding, in your hero phase, roll a dice for each unit within 3 inches of this unit. On a 2-up, it suffers a mortal wound. If that unit has the Nurgle keyword, it suffers 1 mortal wound on a 6-up instead. So if he gets into combat, there is a very good chance he is just crushing stuff left and right. And it's just an optional thing. Like, there's no reason not to take the Incubatch. You're not giving up anything for it. So that's a cool one. I'm not necessarily sure how much you want him in combat. It might be good late game as for clearing objectives, but it's another way that he can deliver mortal wounds. Rack and Ruin is the exact same thing as the others, which is basically after it finishes a charge move, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 1 inch ear, add 2 if he has the Dolorous Toxin bell thing, and a 4-up it suffers D3 mortal wounds. If you are going to build the Lord of Afflictions, I highly recommend you give him the base with the bell. It's just this little thing here. It's literally like the basing stand that they sit upon. One of them has a bell and one of them is just a rock. The bell is the Dolorous Toxin. Highly recommend you do, because if you want him doing things, get him in there crushing stuff. That's my opinion. I'm sure someone smarter than me would probably say, put it on the other unit because you can throw them off to die and have your hero live. I don't really care about that. This guy's out for glory. As for the Swarm Descends, his last rule, he has a pretty interesting thing. During deployment, instead of setting up this unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say it's going to set up hovering in the skies as a reserve unit. If you do so, when you would set up a friendly Pusgoyle blightlords or plague drones unit during deployment, that unit can join this unit instead. Up to 2 Pusgoyle blightlords or plague drone units in any combination can join this unit. At the end of your movement phase, you can set this unit up on the battlefield more than 9 inches from enemy units. If you do, set up all the units that have joined this unit on the battlefield wholly within 12 of this and more than 9 from your enemy. So, sorry about that. There used to be a battalion where you could basically put all these guys in the sky with the Lord of Afflictions, and then it would give you like a movement bonus or something like that when you came down. This essentially took that from a battalion and put it directly into his war scroll. So you choose him, and you can pick 2 units of Pusgoyle blightlords or plague drones to go into the sky with him. This is important because if you do the building option where you do the Lord of Afflictions and 1 Pusgoyle blightlord from this box, you can just set them both up and they can teleport. Like, the rules function so that this ability works, right? You just have him, and your one other unit you choose is the single Pusgoyle blightlord, and they can come down from the sky. When you start talking about full flippin' armies of these guys, Plague drones dump a lot of attacks. They're not terribly powerful, but they can throw a lot of disease points at your opponent. And the Pusgoyle blightlords we already reviewed. It does not have limits onto the size of those units. So you could have a Lord of Affliction and 2 units maxed out of plague drones, which would be, I think, well, depending on the size you're playing with the number of reinforcement points, it could easily be 6 to 12 of them. You know what I mean? Like they're 3 base. If you use 2 reinforcement points on 2 of those units, you're talking easily, that's 12 guys of chonky wounds that come in and can turn 1 charge. So it's quite interesting. I like that quite a bit. I was not expecting them to include plague drones in that, but it makes perfect sense. They're all flying on the same kind of critters. So that is the Lord of Afflictions. It's just an option. If you're going to be buying multiple boxes, at this point, I don't know if you want to go mortal, I would definitely recommend building this guy because he's super cool. He just is, let's be honest. If you're more interested in the demon side of things, I'd say go with the 2 Pusgoyle blightlords. But what we're going to do now is move back to the up top cam and just kind of chat about the box at a high level. So let's kind of put this all into perspective. It is a 1,000 point starter box. When you buy the Vanguard set, you have a 1,000 point army that is perfect for starting Path to Glory, or obviously 1,000 point games of match play, that kind of stuff. As far as the value that you get, I like the fact that it exposes you to different kinds of synergies. There's the myriad of synergies that exist for Plague Bearers, albeit you have to go get the other Heralds of Nurgle if you want to lean that direction. It's a really cool design idea. And there's also the mortal side of things, which they don't have as many buffs and synergies, but they're all individually very solid units, and I like that quite a bit. This is an army, I'm just going to preface, with the new battle tome that they got, they're not nearly as speedy as they used to be, where you could run in charge next to a Gnarlmaw or whatever. Instead, they want to push forward and grind down the enemy because, like I said, remember, at every movement phase and I believe it's combat phase, at the end of it, if there's a unit from your enemy army that is within 3 inches of your units, they take disease points. The way that those work, very, very simply, is that at the end of the battle shock phase, you look at how many disease points a unit has, one of your enemies, you roll that many dice. For each 4 up, they take a mortal wound. So you're constantly chipping away at them just by being near your opponent. Never mind the fact that every unmodified hit roll of a 6 also adds a disease point. And so all of that mortal wound potential is happening at the same time in the background as your normal attack profiles. So it kind of is a steam engine. Once you start losing units, you're going to start losing steam in that because there's fewer people engaged, there's fewer attacks going out. But hopefully the idea is you have ground your opponent out far enough that that's not really a consequence to it. So in terms of the actual models you get, for the purposes specifically of starting a 1,000 point army, it's not start collecting, it's a Vanguard box. It's intended to be for that level of play, 1,000 points. I think it's an interesting set, mainly because I thought they would throw in like a Lord of Blights or a Lord of Plagues, one of the mortal heroes, but they went with the Spoilepox Scrivener, which is an interesting choice. Not necessarily a bad one, but I do think if you want to lean more towards the mortal stuff, the Lord of Afflictions is probably a good choice. And then you can just kind of fill out whatever you want to do from there. If you want to go mortals, buy some more blightkings. Actually, being honest with you, if you really wanted to go Nurgle at the time of recording, I would say pick up this and then like another start collecting box, like the actual, not the demons one, but the Maggotkin of Nurgle, like the mortal specific one, because you get the Lord of Blights, I think, in that one, another unit of Pusgoyle blightlords, and another unit of blightkings. So like those 2 boxes combined, I know it's a little pricey. It's gonna put you around 200, probably a little more with tax and stuff like that. But that being said, that's a killer army because at that point you have all of your battle line figured out. You can build the Lord of Afflictions as a hero from one of those 2 Blight King sets or Blightlord sets. You have Nurgle stuff out the nose. There's a lot of cool things you can do with it. There's a lot of ways to expand. So at this exact moment, that's what I would suggest you do. But let's end this video talking about value. So when I grade value for a set, I fundamentally asked two things. One, do the models that you get represent the faction well? For example, if it's a shooting army and all the models you get in a starter set are like the crappy dregs of the melee, society of that army, it's not a good set because it's not representative of what the faction is like. So does it represent the army? And then secondly, are you actually going to use those models? Like, let's say you start picking up Maggotkin of Nurgle. Are you actually going to use these units once you kind of reach a full collection? So let's break those down. The first question of, do the units represent the army? There are few armies that have units that are as iconic. So what I mean is blightkings are the most ubiquitous of all Nurgle units, as are plague bearers. You will be using both of them because whether you go mortal, meaning you lean heavily into the synergies that have specifically to do with rotbringers and mortal keywords, you have a good sampling of those with the Pusgoyles and the blightkings. If you go demons, you're already getting a sense of what the synergies are going to be like between the Spoilepox scrivener and the plague bearers. So just adding more heralds of Nurgle, meaning the sloppity bilepiper and the poxbringer, they're just going to amplify that. But you get a sampling of both of them, which I do actually like quite a bit. And there's no surprises with the rest of the faction. Everything else in this book is just either beefier and can do more attacks, or I guess the real difference is other units can cast spells, and there's nothing in this set that can. But that's about it. Like, it is very representative of what Nurgle is going to be like. Everything is slow, it plods forward, and when it makes contact with the enemy, it nukes them for mortal wounds by unmodified rolls of 6, of being near them with disease points, of special rules like the blightkings have where they just pick a unit nearby and do mortal wounds to them. Like, all that stuff, it all adds up. And so I would absolutely say this is representative of the army. If you do not like this set, don't play Maggotkin of Nurgle. I cannot tell you that enough. If you do like it, what are you waiting for? Go play Maggotkin of Nurgle. The second question, though, of are you actually going to use these units once you fully have a collection? I'm going to say yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is yes, in the sense of no matter what kind of Maggotkin of Nurgle army you want to build, you're going to be either using blightkings, plague bearers, or a combination thereof. They are your basic battle line choice. They're great for capping objectives. They're tanky. They're nasty. They deliver disease points. I love it. If you are someone who, say, only likes the demon side of Nurgle things, I'm going to be honest, this box has a lot less value, just because so much of the actual monetary value of it is wrapped up in the mortal side of things with the blightkings and the Pusgoyles. Whereas, if you conversely wanted to do a mortal-focused army, it's not bad to have a unit of plague bearers and even the Spoilepox scrivener, because you can summon those things on later on, and you can just keep expanding the mortal half. I guess what I'm really trying to say is if you just want an all-demon army, skip this. Just buy the set separately. Go buy the Start Collecting Demons of Nurgle box, and a whole bunch more plague bearers and the other heralds. But if you want a mixed Nurgle army or a mortal one, to me this is a no-brainer. Because even if you go mortal, you still have contagion points that allow you to summon demons. And if nothing else, boom, in your backlog you have a 10-point plague bearer unit that can just be summoned onto an objective and just sit there. So anyway, friends, that's my thoughts. I actually really like the set. It's not too divergent from the Maggotkin set that came before it. But with the rules changes and stuff, I thought it was a great opportunity to make a new video. One of the things that is very unique about 3rd edition, as they're going forward with creating more battle tomes, is the idea that those dual kits, where you have a unit of 2, one of them can be built as a hero, and the other one has to be a single model unit of whatever it normally is. I like the rules they've added for those. So if you want to build Lord of Afflictions, you're not out a unit. You can still take the other Pusgoyle Blightlord with him, and they can go have fun together in the sky, and then, come around, attack your opponents, that kind of stuff. So I like that there's options there. It seems like a very smart way to do their selling, in terms of just how they sell model kits and stuff like that. So I thoroughly enjoy it. I haven't quite decided what kind of Maggotkin army I want to build, but I am going to do one. So let me dwell on that a little bit, and I'll get back to you guys. If you have any questions about the set, go ahead and leave it in the comments down below. With the exception of the Lord of Afflictions, there's no multi-kits in here, and you do get all the parts to build 2 Pusgoyles or 1 Pusgoyle and the Lord of Afflictions. So If you have any more questions beyond that, leave them in the comments down below and I'd be happy to answer. So thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you next time. Happy wargaming.